though there were still aspects of myself I knew that I needed to overcome because I was creating the same situations in my life again and again. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I need to write a new story. And literally I wanted to break the habit of being myself. So that aspect of myself that cares what people think or needs to be a people pleaser or, like I said, it requires external validation. Like I no longer wanted to be that person anymore because it was limiting me. I didn't know who I was anymore. Like I wasn't not operating as my authentic self.
There is rarely a life untouched by hardship or challenge. On this podcast, we invite our guests to share their very personal stories. We harness the wisdom and resilience of our guests, which has shaped who they are today.
Carl Rogers said, "That which is most personal is in fact most universal." Together we'll be inspired to embrace the resilience in our own stories and to gain strength in the face of adversity and have a few laughs along the way.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling.
Both Donna and Di were born here on these lands. We are grateful to draw on the culture of telling and sharing stories, and we hope that you will draw inspiration from the stories that are shared here. Today we welcome Dr Vish Ramakonar. Vish is a corporate trainer, consultant, leadership coach and lecturer. She has 20 plus years experience in corporate training and consulting, and in particular some neuroscience-based behavioural change management and project management and change management. The list goes on. Vish is a lecturer at ECU School of Business and Law, and she's a certified neurochange solutions consultant, and she has a PhD in engineering, specifically in telecommunications. And there is nothing about what you're going to hear in this story that can be represented by that bio. Yes, there's an amazing host of qualifications there, but Vish's story today focuses on something much more personal. And it was a captivating and engaging story, and you won't fail to be moved by it.
Vish, it's really great to have you here. Thank you very much for coming today. And it was very interesting how I met you. I only met you very recently through LinkedIn, through a LinkedIn post. But when I caught up with you and met you, we found out that we knew someone in common, which was Arun, who used to run the Annalakshmi restaurant. So I might hand over to you to explain how you know Arun and the Annalakshmi restaurant, because that is a very integral part of your story, I think.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much, Donna, for having me. And I have known Arun for, probably over 20, 30 years now. But yes, we're all part of the same kind of community, and our spiritual guide, who came here in the 1970s, wanted to create something where our community could be of service to the Perth community in some way. And the premise behind his teachings is that that universal consciousness, whatever you want to call it, source energy or God or whatever you want to call it, resides in each and every person. So he says, like, when we serve in any way, whether it's feeding people or through performing arts, which is another project that he had started as well, we are serving that divinity that resides within each and every person.
Mm.
So that was the intention when he started Annalakshmi. So my dad was actually the first manager of Annalakshmi in 1991. It first opened in 1991.
And what is Annalakshmi?
Okay, so Annalakshmi, the name Annalakshmi is a Hindu sort of name. In Sanskrit, it refers to the goddess of sustenance.
Okay.
So Anna means, you could say sustenance, and Lakshmi, the goddess Lakshmi is the goddess of abundance, you might say. So Annalakshmi means, she almost like the mother who feeds people sort of thing.
Mm.
So the premise was to be able to create a beautiful space where we could feed people, and also because we're vegetarian, we offered vegetarian food, which was nourishing, almost like a mother was cooking for you, because there were actually mothers who were running the kitchen. And
it was amazing place.
Yeah.
It really was.
So everyone was pretty much a volunteer.
Mm.
I remember growing up, I was about 16 when it first started, and I remember, going there to serve every, after uni and after I was in high school that time, but when uni started, I used to, go in my spare time to help serve lunchtime crowds or evening crowds. And I think it was in my formative years, so I actually built a lot of my communication skills, my people skills from that experience. And we used to do all sorts of things, like we had the same age group. We used to do dishwashing, we used to wash the floors, we used to wash the toilets, all with the intention that what we were doing was serving something greater than ourselves.
Mm. And there was a very strong philosophy there that you paid what you felt that you should pay, wasn't it?
Yeah. So when Annalakshmi, the interesting thing though was when Annalakshmi first started, it wasn't a pay-as-you-wish system. It was like you pay a certain amount for a meal. And we had actually different types of, you could say, like experiences, I think you could say. So there was one called Annalakshmi, which is like, that's what they call the gold service, where you would be served course by course, and all the utensils were made from gold-plated cutlery and things like that. And he wanted us to give everyone a unique experience. And I think what happened is that it evolved over time. And when we moved from the Esplanade to the Barrack Street or Barrack Square jetty, that's when the ethos or the philosophy changed to pay as you wish.
Right.
And in that space, I guess because it was a much bigger space in terms of like one big space, whereas in the other Esplanade we had a big space where people would eat in the restaurant, but we also had a space in the back where we had like Indian handicrafts and things like that, because again, we wanted to support local artisans in India who normally would, they don't get paid much for their art, for the creativity. So we wanted to support them and give them what they deserved in terms of payment, and to promote their services, because they were talking about, like our spiritual guide told us about some of the sculptures and the stories behind some of the paintings, where he would say that the artist would actually almost go into a meditative state, and whatever comes through them is like what they create. So you can't really sometimes put a price on that stuff. It's not like it's not mass-produced stuff. So I was very much educated. I think if I didn't have that, I probably would not be educated in my culture, Indian heritage. So I think also we learnt Indian dancing, like classical dancing.
I saw that you were a dance teacher.
Yeah, I used to perform a lot, different Indian classical dance styles from different areas of India. So from some of the names are Bharatanatyam, Odissi, Kathak. We even used to learn a bit of contemporary and ballet and things like that. But we used to do a lot of performances. So I remember it was a lot of fun for all of us. We would have performances in Annalakshmi, and we grew up and we used to tour and do performances around India and Malaysia. It was really a fun time.
Oh, yeah, it would have been.
And that was when I was studying at uni and stuff like that. So it was really a different experience, I think, having that. Like, we didn't take things as seriously. We didn't take life so seriously because we were doing all these things like traveling and performing, and so you didn't sweat the small stuff. Like, I was doing my PhD and I don't think my supervisor was too happy with the way that I was progressing with my PhD. But like,
sounds like a great way to do a PhD.
Yeah. I wasn't present half the time, but I managed to get it done in the end. But you know what I mean? Like, something like that would have probably created a lot more stress than it did at the time, because our spiritual guide had allowed us to focus on something that was bigger than ourselves.
And that you have that sort of ethos of serving the community and having a close community.
And I did grow up with that experience of everything working out in the end, no matter what challenges we faced. So I grew up in Geraldton. My parents, I was born in Singapore, but my parents migrated to Australia when I was 1. The first 7 years of my life were in Geraldton.
So which is about 500 k's north of Perth.
Yeah, about 500 k's north of Perth. And this is in the 70s, right? So there was not that many Indian families at that time. And it was an amazing childhood. Like, we lived on the beach. We had that beautiful lifestyle. My dad was an accountant, and he was the accountant of this place called Bones, which was the original, well, Myers had taken over Bones.
Oh, I remember Bones. Now you say that. That was
Department store.
Yeah. So
What was it like for your family being pretty much the only Indian family?
That's the thing. We were welcomed wherever we went. We had, in fact, my parents, they made the best friends they ever had, lifelong friends in Geraldton, who we still keep in touch with to this day. Both my parents have now passed, but I still keep in touch with those people who are like my parents. So they made lifelong friendships there, and it's a different, I guess it's having that small town community. Everyone's very close and very supportive, and it was actually really, really beautiful.
Did you feel that you had, you still had that cultural piece when you were growing up in Geraldton, or did your parents kind of not really do so much cultural things there?
We did, in the sense my parents were quite, you could say, spiritual. So I grew up with a lot of spirituality in my life, but not the dancing or the music, and like there was no Annalakshmi, none of that. So it was mainly just the spiritual part of it. So I grew up with them, hearing them chant mantras and things like that. So that was normal. But I think all the other stuff came later when I was about 15 or 16 in my formative years. That's when Annalakshmi started, and I was exposed more. I hadn't been to India till I was 21. So it was really an experience when we went. And when we went to India for the first time, we all went as a big group. Our community has places in Malaysia, in Penang, in Kuala Lumpur, in Singapore, Malacca.
And Vish, what when you talk about community, our community, does our community have a name or a cultural reference, or what's the context when you talk about our community?
So we're known as the Shiva family. That's what our community is called. So I don't know how the name came about, but it's been around since the 70s, since our spiritual guide came to Malaysia, and then he came to Perth. So different members joined the community at different times. So we joined the community, I think, in the 70s. Because, funny story, my parents couldn't have children for 5 years. They tried. And the doctors told them to put their name on the adoption list. And someone introduced them to our spiritual guide, and he gave my mum a particular mantra to recite. And after she recited that mantra, she conceived me. So it was very funny, because then after that she had subsequently another 2 children after that. So and there was another person who in Geraldton who couldn't have children either, and so he asked my mum to recite the mantra 108 times and record it on a cassette tape and give it to her to listen. And then she conceived. So,
what did your mum make of that? What was the story that she passed down around that to you?
I don't know. She just told me that story, that they couldn't have children, and the doctor said, put your name on the adoption list, and this is what happened. And funny enough, before my mum, I think they didn't know that she had conceived. My dad had a dream that one of the Hindu goddesses, her name's Visalakshi, she came as a small child running up to him saying, "Daddy, where's mummy?" And then they found out that my mum was pregnant. And so when I was born, they named me after that goddess. Her name's Visalakshi. So my full name's Visalakshi. I'm known as Vish.
This episode is brought to you by Impact Society. Impact Society is a company focused on helping everyday managers become world-changing leaders. They provide straightforward and stylish tools, training and content to elevate leadership skills and mindsets and help leaders thrive both at work and in life. I personally know the company founders, Sean and Joel, and they have set up Impact Society as they saw a gap in the market for leadership training with technically based staff that wasn't as expensive or as lengthy as an MBA or other leadership courses at university. So essentially they've scratched their own itch. They both come from technical backgrounds, and then Joel set up his own consultancy company, and Sean has been in diverse leadership roles in government and the private sector. We are especially excited about Impact Society bringing you this episode because they have a new product, a strategic planning toolkit, which is designed to help leaders put in place a straightforward strategic plan that any organisation or team can follow. As many of us know, strategic planning is not the easiest or most straightforward thing to do. So this toolkit, I've had a good look at it myself. It's completely clear, easy to follow. There's checklists, there's emails, everything you could need to put in place a strategic plan. And for our listeners of the Double D's podcast, there's a 20% discount on this strategic planning toolkit. You just need to go to impactsociety.co, and in the discount code, when you purchase the strategic planning toolkit, you put in the discount code Double D's, so Double DS at the checkout, and then you'll get your 20% discount. So we would encourage anyone, especially people who are new into leadership roles, to check it out.
So that sense of spirituality was always with you. You probably never knew a time where it wasn't present for you.
Well, there was a time, so that's what I was going to get to, that as I was growing up, my dad lost his job in Bones when Myers took over, and we had to move to Perth. And unfortunately, my dad wasn't, for some reason after that, he wasn't able to hold down a job for a long time. So we kept moving from school to school, from place to place, and eventually we moved to Melbourne. And at that time in Melbourne, we were there for about 3 years. My dad had stabilised, we were doing quite well. My mum was working as well. And that was the time that we were asked for our spiritual guide asked us to come back to Perth because he wanted my dad to start Annalakshmi and be the first manager. And so he did that without thinking, because I think they had that faith, So
after you'd come along?
Yeah, after I'd come along. I don't know whether I would have that faith right now, but they drove across the Nullarbor with the three of us from Melbourne to Perth. And also on the way to Melbourne, we drove as well. So that was a great experience. And when we got here, he scouted venues with some of the other community members. We found the place. Everything got started. But then unfortunately my dad got very sick. So he contracted this rare form of meningitis called cryptococcal meningitis, which is a very rare form, and he almost didn't survive. So 1 minute he was okay, the next minute we went to see him in the hospital. He was being fed through a gastric tube. He couldn't speak. He couldn't do anything for himself, completely disabled. So that was a huge life event for me when I was about 18.
What year was that, Vish?
1993.
Yeah.
Wow. So I think being young and also having our spiritual guide physically around to help give us that reassurance that everything's going to be okay. My mum used to go, my dad was in hospital for 9 months, and I remember she used to go twice a day and just sit by his bedside and chant mantras, and she was just so devoted and so never gave up. She was completely had that faith. And she couldn't really give all her attention to us. All her attention was on Dad, and somehow we were, we grew up, we had the community with us, and we continued on. I was at university, and I think being young, I was able to be quite resilient at that point and sort of find a way to cope. And having the activities and having the community really, really helped, because it sort of takes your mind off.
How much younger are your younger siblings than you?
So my sister is 2 years younger than me. She was 2 years younger than me, and my brother was 6 years younger. So I was the oldest.
So did you feel like you had to be a real support to them as well?
Yeah, I think we all coped with it very differently. My brother, I think because he was only 11 at the time, losing like a father figure would have, I think, had a big impact on him. Yeah, and I think it was a very painful time for us as well. But I think the way I tried to cope was by making myself so busy that I didn't have to think. Because the moment I'll sit down, come back home and sit down in front of the TV, I'll see my mum looking after my dad and I'll just feel really upset.
Yeah.
So I would distract myself in any way possible, like call a friend, watch TV, you know, I was hardly in the house because I just couldn't, I think.
Sounds like a really normal survival strategy for getting through a very tough time.
Which I didn't know. Now in hindsight, this is what I realised I was doing, right? So I became a person who was quite, didn't know how to sort of process their emotions or feelings. So I kind of became a person who was not very expressive. I in hindsight now I can see I was trying to survive and I was always thinking, when is the next thing going to happen? So that was my kind of psyche, you know, but everything was, we still, you know, everything went on. I graduated university. I went on to do a PhD.
What did you do at university, Vish?
I studied engineering, telecommunications engineering. And funny story, I was the first female graduate from ECU.
Amazing.
In engineering. That was a funny story. And they had my face up in the newspaper and the face of women in engineering, and I was like complete imposter syndrome. I was cringing, thinking, "Oh my God, what is all this attention on me? I don't know anything." It's that, you know, that cultural thing that we grow up with, where I think we're always taught to be a high achiever and you're always compared against someone else, and so I think culturally, I always felt like I was really. Yeah, I felt like an imposter sometimes, like I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't good enough. There's all these, I guess you could say, complexes. Now in hindsight, I can see all these things, right? But when you're growing up, you don't know what's going on.
Had you always wanted to study engineering? What was it that got you to do engineering?
Again, I don't know. I think our community also has a computer software company, or we did have a computer software company, and so I think that was where I was guided to go to join. And I was going to do computer engineering or computer science, but I decided to join engineering, and which was very similar to the computer engineering stream anyway. But I don't know why I specialised in telecommunications. I really don't know.
And what was it like with hardly any women when you were studying?
Yeah, it was again, I don't think I didn't notice it too much. Everyone was very friendly, very helpful. I never felt like I was segregated because I was a woman. There was two of us and we were good friends. And, we had a good group of friends, and they all used to help. We used to help each other out with assignments and things like that. And also I had a boyfriend who was 1 year above me in engineering, so that helped as well. So he subsequently became my husband. And he was around the whole time that I was studying as well. So we were able to study together. We had assignments and things like that that we'd all sort of help each other out with. So it was a good sort of formative years. And that's when we started dancing. Annalakshmi started. We'd go performing. And I think everything was good until my mum passed away suddenly in 2012. And that, I think, was the biggest life event I've gone through in my life. So we always thought my dad would pass away before my mum, being unwell for so long. But I think the toll of being a carer she was only 67.
Wow,
and she had a massive stroke and she passed away within a few hours. So it was a huge shock for us. And I think that's when things started to unravel for me. I was not really, like, I had some stressful periods before that, but I think this kind of was the biggest, and I didn't know how to cope with it. Like, I wasn't sure how to grieve. And my dad, we didn't want to put him in a facility or anything like that because my mum had looked after him for so many years. So I said that I would, look after him. And we moved into my brother and sister-in-law's house, and we were all living together. And I think because I wasn't processing the grief and also the physical stuff of looking after my dad, I ended up getting chronic fatigue and being bedridden for like months, and eventually had to put my dad in a facility. And so started my journey on looking for ways to become more resilient and cope with challenging situations. So I remember asking the universe to give me, some help to cope with all of this. And I walked into a secondhand bookstore in Fremantle. I think it's Elizabethan bookstore.
I know exactly where you are down there.
Yeah. So the first few books that popped out to me, there was one book called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay.
Mm-hmm.
So if you all don't know who Louise Hay is, she's actually the founder of Hay House Publishing. She's now passed away, but she, you could say, was the founder of all this self-help sort of movement. And that book, You Can Heal Your Life, was the first book that I think put the idea in my head that your thoughts have an effect on your life.
Mm.
And I started, applying those things by doing affirmations and things like that. But I think what I didn't know was that I still had to process the emotions that I'd stuffed down.
Yeah.
And what happened was it became that toxic positivity or false positivity.
Mm.
So things were changing, but I had not addressed those things, which is why I think the chronic fatigue, because I was in constant fight or flight.
That was a massive thing that you had to go through with your mum dying suddenly, looking after your dad.
Yeah.
So many layers of different grief there.
Yeah.
The grief of having to put your dad in care.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the layers of, and then you've also talked about the cultural piece, that all is in the washing machine, isn't it? The mix of...
Yeah. So the fact that I always cared about what people thought about me, being a people pleaser, needing external validation, I think that was what unraveled me, because I tried to put up a stoic front to show that I could, that I wasn't vulnerable, that I wasn't weak, that I could do this, and tried to be strong, but I was not acknowledging what I was, and until my body basically gave the message to me. Because I just kept pushing against it. The body's just the messenger. It's not actually, it's always trying to help you.
How long after your mum passed away did you get chronic fatigue?
So she passed away in 2012, 2015. So it hit me like a few years later.
Yeah.
Because I was in that chronic fight or flight for so long.
And then you were looking after your father for those 3 years, yeah?
Yeah, till about, till 2014, I think, is when we put him in the facility. And I think I had just been so used to being in that habit of being in fight or flight, my body didn't know how to relax and come down. So in 2015, it just said no.
And there's that expression, that I think Basil van der Kolk, when he wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
That it's a beautiful expression that you used. It's that the body is telling us, it's giving us clues, and sometimes it has to give us some pretty big, loud clues in order for us to listen differently.
Yeah.
And I think you do hear, I've heard recently a number of people who've cared for people who have, had very serious health issues, even if they haven't passed away themselves, just that kind of underlying stress and responsibility. And I think it's really crucial to kind of take some time out and look after yourself when you're a carer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that was what the lesson I was being taught, that I needed to process these emotions that I was stuffing down. And you kind of get angry that you feel like your body's betraying you. So I went through all those emotions of feeling angry and frustrated, but I think that goes against what the message is about. So when I finally accepted it and was ready to find a way to come out of it is when I started healing. And I went to India for what they call Ayurvedic treatment, which is a traditional ancient way of healing in India, where they treat the actually underlying, because no doctor could work out what was wrong with me. They didn't know it was my doctor didn't diagnose me as having chronic fatigue. It was only after many, a lot of investigation that we realised that that's what it was. But my blood tests were all normal, except maybe my iron was a bit low, but no one could work out what's wrong with me. Why couldn't I get out of it? Why couldn't I function?
Was there any mention or any consideration for your grief journey from medical professionals? Was there any sense of...
No connection, no.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's because they treat what is being presented, and some doctors, though, they do go back and ask you, has anything stressful been happening? And, I think nowadays it's getting a bit more prevalent. But back then I felt completely lost, and it was very scary not knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
But my mother-in-law actually, she was going to see an Ayurvedic doctor in Malaysia, and she took me along with her, and he felt my pulse. So what they do is they feel your pulse. And as soon as he felt my pulse, he said, okay, you need to be admitted into our facility immediately.
Oh, wow.
So they knew something was not right. And my mother-in-law happened to be going to India to get treatment. So I ended up going with her to a place called Coimbatore near South India.
Okay.
I was there for about 24 days. Actually, they want you to be there for 40 days, but I couldn't take that much time off because what they do is they're not treating a symptom. They're going down to the root cause, and they're almost pressing the reset button on you. And they had a name for what I had, and they had a diagnosis, and they gave it was so funny.
Was it a relief?
It was. So they'll have a consultant doctor coming around, and he felt my pulse and he told me, you're going to be okay. So that was reassuring. Even though I wasn't feeling okay, he just said, you're going to be okay. So I was like, okay.
What's involved in this treatment, is it?
It's quite involved. So what they do is there's a whole heap of concoctions and medicinal sort of tinctures and things like that they give you orally. Mm-hmm. So at 6 a.m. they'll come with some horrible tasting medicine that you have to down, and then you're sent for treatment I think it's for the first 10 days. They do this thing called abhyanga, which is like an oil, applying medicated oil to your body. It's not really a massage. It's more about applying the medicated oil so your body absorbs the medicine. And then you go into 10 days of intense therapy where there will be 6 therapists like literally pouring oil all over your body, litres of oil, and there'll be some oil that will be dripping onto the middle centre of your forehead. It's called Shirodhara. It's supposed to like reset the nervous system, like calm the nervous system down. Oh. So that's the intensive. And during that time they say you can't do anything. You can't overexert yourself. You basically have to be lying in the bed so your body can just because all your muscles and everything.
Just sort of receive it and allow the nervous system to relax into it.
Yeah. So that's really hard, when you've got your mind with you. So that's the whole part of the process. It's mind, body and soul. That's healing. So I remember reading, they encourage you to read a lot of books that are uplifting or watch things that are uplifting, things to heal your mind as well as your body's healing. And you're given a strict diet as well. They give you food with basically no oil because your liver's detoxing. Yeah. And then after that intense period is over, then they go into the nourishing phase where they get this poultice, which has herbs in it, and it's mixed with milk as well, I think, and they just put it all over your body. Like it's nourishing. It's supposed to give nourishment to the body. So
you must
it's quite intensive.
Like, did you get a sense that you really trusted the process that you were going through?
Yeah. At that point, I'd already kind of surrendered to what was happening to me, and I just trusted because I was open to receiving help in any way. And I think, and when I had finished the 24 days, so what they say is after however many days of treatment you have to rest for that exact amount of time as well. So when I went back to Perth, I couldn't do much, like you can't lift groceries or anything like that. So it's like a full-on recovery period. But I was able to function at least after that because I run corporate training in project management and change management. So those courses are like 5 days long, 9 to 5. It's quite intensive. So I was able to at least still do those things. So it helped me to continue to function, but I was still not 100% fully healed, I think. I think the aspect of my mind as well was not fully healed. And so, again, you ask the universe for help, and I was put onto a book called Medical Medium by this person called Anthony William. And I started reading that book and it made a lot of sense to me. So I started following the protocols, and he talked about how to heal chronic fatigue, and it healed me, like healed all the physical symptoms. I was completely healed. So it involved, taking celery juice in the morning on an empty stomach and basically having a lot of fruit and vegetables, antiviral fruits and vegetables.
What would be an example of one antiviral fruit and vegetable?
So example of an antiviral fruits are red apples, bananas, mandarins. They all have high antiviral properties. And I remember he said if you're not eating fruit, then you're really limiting yourself in healing. Because there's this fruit fear, I think, out there. So when I added more fruits in, I healed. The healing was much more rapid. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And because we're scared of sugar, but he says...
I was just going to say, often our dietary restrictions are around not having even natural sugars.
Yeah. But what he says is that it's not the sugar content. It actually drops into your gut and is passed out. What causes issues is that when you mix it with fat, that's what creates the spike in our blood sugar levels and things like that.
This episode is brought to you by my coaching program about navigating a life quake. If you've experienced a life quake, which is a traumatic life event that you are struggling to cope with, then this 9-week coaching program is for you. This is based on a very traumatic workplace-related incident that I had in November 2021 where I was absolutely struggling to cope. Over the months that followed, I documented everything I did to recover, and I've incorporated it into a framework, which is the Stronger Framework. So the program is Navigating a Life Quake, and it's amongst a supportive community, a transformational 9-week coaching program, which includes weekly virtual coaching sessions and lots of other materials. So if you're interested and you can relate to this, for listeners of the Double D's podcast, there's a 20% discount. Go to my personal website, www.donnasbalconyviews.com.au. You can find out more information about this transformational coaching program. And if you put in Double D, so double DS as one word, you can get a 20% discount on the 9-week coaching program.
So the Ayurvedic, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, got you so far and certainly helped with that reset, allowed you to come back to work to some extent, and then you really knew you needed to take it to another level to really feel healed.
Correct, yeah, because it was still not 100%. I was still having some symptoms. So when that was done, I was feeling a lot better, mentally and physically. And though there were still aspects of myself I knew that I needed to overcome because I was creating the same situations in my life again and again. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I need to write a new story. And literally I wanted to break the habit of being myself. So that aspect of myself that cares what people think or needs to be a people pleaser, or like I said, it requires external validation. Like I no longer wanted to be that person anymore because it was limiting me. I didn't know who I was anymore. Like I wasn't not operating as my authentic self. So I think, again, you ask the universe, and then this interview pops up on my phone, and it's someone interviewing this person called Dr. Joe Dispenza. And when I watched that interview, it just was like a light bulb moment. It made complete sense to me what was going on and why what had happened to me and all of those things. And I bought his book. I think it was the book that I bought was called Becoming Supernatural, but he's also got a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Both of them are incredible. But I started applying the teachings that he had talked about in the book, and I started seeing big changes in myself, and other people started seeing changes in myself.
What would they have noticed, Vish?
That I was no longer a people pleaser. That I was quite comfortable to say no to things, that I had a stronger conviction in myself. I had more self-belief, more confidence in making decisions on my own rather than seeking someone else's opinion.
So what might you have noticed in yourself, Vish?
I think what I noticed in myself was that I started to trust my inner guidance system more. And when I felt that I needed to do something, I would not second guess it. I would go ahead and do it without worrying what X, Y, Z would be thinking. So having that conviction in myself, I think, was such a blessing and allowed me to operate more as my authentic self. And I think that's what I notice about myself. That was the greatest gift I think that his work has given me, being able to trust myself more and be able to have that self-belief and self-confidence in myself, to know that whatever decision I'm making, if I listen to, a lot of the times the decisions don't even make logical sense, but because I've had the experience of when I follow it, it's never let me down. So now I trust it more and more.
Yeah, I imagine it's a bit like a muscle that you have to rebuild from scratch, and then you learn to trust the strength that you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what sort of period of time has passed now from maybe the time you went to India to, intersecting with Joe's work and then really starting to feel like you're in your authentic self?
Yeah.
What sort of period of time are we talking about?
So 2015 was when I went to India, and that's when I think I started off on that journey. And then it was 2019 when I found Joe's work, so it's 4 years later. That's the year my dad passed away. And when my dad passed away, I allowed myself to feel the grief as it came up, and so I let it go. So I think I coped with his passing in a much healthier way than I did with my mother. Now that I had the tools and the knowledge and knowing what had happened to me, I was able to pass through, allow his death to sort of pass through me in a more natural way without any suppression. So it was a lot more healthier way to process it. And I think that also having that freedom now that I didn't have that responsibility of my dad allowed me to delve deeper into Joe's work. And I think that's when I realised I wanted to share this with other people. So I saw that he had a corporate trainer program, and I applied to become one of his trainers, and I was accepted. And I went to one of his week-long advanced workshops, which was a transformative experience. I had an incredible experience there which changed me at a deep level. It's a 7-day workshop. And then I think it was in February in 2020 that I flew to Palm Springs to be trained by him for this train the trainer thing. And as I was flying back, it was February, and that's when the world was shutting down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I managed to get that in before they closed the borders. And so I got certified that year, and since then I've trained, hundreds of people, and I've seen like incredible stories, incredible transformations. So I'm very grateful that I get to do that. That's my passion. Obviously, I still like teaching the project management stuff and all that, but I think this is what lights me up in terms of, seeing somebody being able to, I've had a lady who, she was given 6 months to live, and she came to my workshop at the beginning of the year, and she told me after putting some of the practices into place, she can see that her disease is reversing. And her daughter said to her, "Mum, you're different. You've changed a lot." Like she's telling me how she's changed on a personality level, but also health-wise. And many people have come off their anxiety medication after applying the tools as well.
I think it's because you've gone through your own very difficult journey and it's taken you such a long time. It must be very satisfying helping other people go through a similar journey.
And now I can see why I had to go through those things, because without that experience, I would not be able to do what I'm doing right now. I wouldn't be where I am right now, because I'd probably be on some other pathway. But I can definitely see the wisdom in what had happened to me, and I see that they were blessings in disguise sometimes, because of it had transformed me in such a way. Each experience had transformed me to the point where I'd overcome so many aspects of myself that weren't serving me.
And I remember when we caught up the other day, Vish, you were saying because you're still lecturing in engineering, there's that double side where you can help, people who are engineers and doing in quite stressful jobs. But then if something happens in their personal life, everything can unravel. And you were saying that because you've got this other skill set now, you can really help them.
I notice that a lot of my students I'm actually helping when they talk to me sometimes about their personal stuff. I can support them in other ways as well. And often, when I'm teaching a Prince 2 class or something will come up and then we'll have a conversation. And actually in the early days that used to happen quite often where I'd suddenly talk about my personal experience and then people would resonate with that and a lot of them had written down all the stuff that I told you all about medical medium and Joe Dispenza, because that's what it's about, right? I think in the end we're all human beings and life is going to chuck challenges at us, but that's why I think I was telling you, Donna, the other day, the book that had really helped me because I've recently lost my sister as well about 2 months ago.
Oh, Vish.
Yeah,
so sorry.
It's again, every experience that happens, I believe there's something for me that I need to that some transformative aspect of it. And there's a book called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. He's also got a book called The Surrender Experiment. Both brilliant books. You know it?
I do. Yeah. I have. It's been a long time since I have thought about that book.
Yeah. So I think coping with my sister's passing, it's like he talks about whenever an emotion comes up or you feel triggered by something, that's actually life's way of bringing up something that you've stored in your body. And often we don't want to feel that, so we push it back down again. But if we just allow it to come up and then just relax and let it go and be the witness of it, practicing that has really helped. Yeah, because it helps to let go. It brings up stuff that that is not serving you and gives you an opportunity to let it go. So, yeah.
And I found this for myself as well, that sometimes you go through very difficult times and you've made yourself stronger through those difficult times and you've been able to help a lot of other people. But at the same time, because you've gone through that journey, you're now able to help yourself more now that you're going through another very, very difficult grief situation in your own life. So,
I mean, her circumstances are like, I did go through all the emotions like anger and frustration and a lot of things, but I think if you allow yourself to feel it and, again, let it go, like as it comes up, don't try and suppress it. Let it come up and let it go. And then I just came to a point where I was like, okay, Vish, do you want to feel like this all the time? And I was like, no. Okay, then do something about it. You can change it. So I was like, okay. So now I see that, again, she sort of like appeared in my dream and she told me that she's at peace. So I think that was very sort of healing as well to have that confirmation, yeah.
What was her name, Vish?
Bhavani.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Vish, we've really, really loved hearing your life story and your journey and all the amazing things that have happened to you and your very important work now helping others. Is there any last thing that you'd like to say before we close off today with people listening?
Yeah. What I would say is this was a saying that I've heard before. I don't know where it comes from, but whenever something happens in your life that seems like a challenging situation, ask yourself not why is this happening to me, but how is this happening for me? Because there is always something in that situation that maybe there's something that we need to learn or some aspect of ourselves that needs to be let go so I always believe everything is always happening for our highest good, though it doesn't look like that. Even in very challenging situations, in hindsight, I can see why something happened the way that it did because it was for my highest good. So I think if people can have that perspective and try to sort of, and try to see that life is always happening for you.
It's a big fundamental shift from 2 to 4.
Yeah.
And Vish, if people would like to reach out, we'll obviously share how they can contact you. But if they were interested, for example, in doing some training with you, with Joe's work, how do you like to be connected?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn or through my website, drvishramakonar.com. My email address.
We can share that.
Yeah, you can share that.
Yeah.
We'll put that in the show notes, and we'll also include some of the books that you...
Yeah, if you can share the books, that will really help a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Vish. We really, really appreciate it. And it was very fortuitous that we had a coffee very recently. And thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vish.
To both of you for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode today, and we really appreciate all of our listeners. And we know that these stories of courage and resilience are really impacting on people. So if you know of someone today that you think would enjoy or gain something from this episode, please share it so that our listeners can grow and more people can be impacted.
So Donna, Vish's story we've just heard, pretty powerful, and there's so many things we could comment on, but just remind me, this restaurant where Vish started her story today that moved from town to Barrack Street Jetty, how did you even go there?
Well, it was very interesting because I knew of Annalakshmi because of my work, and so I knew Arun and worked closely with him over many years. But before that, I was at university doing my master's, and we had an assignment. We had to do an assignment on an ethical organisation, and me and my friends, we did our assignment on Annalakshmi, and that was when I first went in and interviewed Arun and found out about their philosophies and their community spirit and all the voluntary work that all of them had done for the community. So that was how I first found out about it, and then later on was working quite closely with them in other areas. So yes, and then I was very surprised when Vish reached out to me for a coffee, and then it turns out her father was the first manager. So yeah, I think it's one of those examples of which Vish spoke about at length in her interview about the universe and various things happening. And when I talk to Arun about all these things, he believes that all these things happen for a reason. And so that's the story.
Yeah, incredible.